over. Or is it? Without those items, the Death Paintings arc won't happen. But we already know Kenjaku had Mekamaru hired as an insider agent long before this. So in this timeline, he simply has Mekamaru steal the fingers and the Death Paintings himself, instead of Mahito. Mekamaru goes through with it to get his body fixed, and then tries to deal with Kenjaku and Mahito afterward. Unfortunately, that just means Mekamaru dies even earlier than the original story. When he delivers the items and gets his body fixed, Mahito kills him. Ironically, this should make things easier for the curses, since Mekamaru never gets the chance to set up a contingency plan for Gojo's sealing. But honestly, who cares? Because how the hell is Gojo getting sealed now anyway? The Death Paintings arc goes roughly the same way as it did in the original story. Yuji and Nobara kill 2 of the 3 Death Paintings, and Megumi defeats a finger bear using his domain expansion. Then we get to the Shibuya incident, and let me be clear, the Shibuya incident as we know it is impossible in this timeline. It was an insanely well-crafted trap that required Geto's face, Geto's curse technique, and near-perfect manipulation of Gojo's psychology, and none of those conditions exist anymore. So let's break down why it can't happen. No Geto body and no Geto face means no shock factor to exploit, and even if Kenjaku did somehow manage to take Geto's body, Gojo wouldn't be shocked, because little does Kenjaku know, Gojo has all his memories now. That forces Kenjaku to cook a completely new plan, and that plan would have to target Gojo's one confirmed weakness, his students. He can't beat Gojo in a straight fight, so his only option is to try and force a no-win scenario. In other words, simultaneous multi-point crisis. Maybe Megumi gets targeted by the Zenin clan, maybe Yuta is framed as a rogue sorcerer by the higher-ups, or maybe Yuji gets kidnapped by Mahito and Kenjaku. But even then, Gojo can handle all 3 of those no problem. He's the only real political authority in the Jujutsu world, so the Zenin clan can't touch Megumi, and the higher-ups can't do anything to Yuta. The only situation that even starts to get tricky is Yuji getting kidnapped. If Mahito and Kenjaku were to feed him multiple fingers at once, and a 15-finger Sukuna came out to start massacring people, that could get messy. But even then, Sukuna still wouldn't be at a level where he could truly rival Gojo. He can't even maintain control of Yuji for long, and Yuji would eventually take his body back. On top of that, Kenjaku wouldn't risk having a 15-finger Sukuna get liquidated by Gojo, so he'll avoid that option too, which means Yuji won't be taken, at least not yet. Honestly, things look terrible for Kenjaku. He knows that the moment he appears in front of Gojo, he gets neutralized instantly, and until he deals with Gojo, he can't move forward with anything he's been planning for the past 1,000 years. So while Kenjaku would still try something on October 31st, he'll fail. Without the one way to catch Gojo off guard, nothing bad will happen, because Gojo won't be sealed or defeated. If anything, Kenjaku just takes even more L's. Dagon still gets killed, and Choso realizes Yuji's his brother and ends up switching sides like in the original timeline. Alright, now Kenjaku's back is truly against the wall, but a planner of his caliber isn't just gonna fold. Instead, he goes all in on that final contingency plan of using Sukuna. First, Kenjaku personally kidnaps Yuji. I mentioned earlier that I'd eventually reveal the body Kenjaku's using in this timeline, and it's Kaori Itadori's body, Yuji's mother. Kenjaku simply approaches Yuji under some random harmless pretext, while looking like some random civilian. He lures Yuji somewhere out of Gojo's reach, and then reveals that he's actually his mother. If Kenjaku pulls this off with the same psychological precision he used on Gojo before sealing him in the prison realm, Yuji would suffer a mental collapse similar to what Megumi experiences right before Sukuna takes over his body. Now, I don't think that alone would be enough to shatter Yuji's will to the point where Sukuna instantly takes control. But Kenjaku didn't spend his entire existence winging this. He must have had countless plans built around using Yuji as Sukuna's vessel, because that's literally the only reason he gave birth to Yuji in the first place. Plus, because Kenjaku and Yuji are blood related, and Sukuna and Yuji are also blood related, Kenjaku would be able to make some kind of binding vow that involves Yuji's body to Sukuna as a vessel. The more you think about it, the more it lines up. After all, as I just said, Yuji was born to be Sukuna's vessel. And after Sukuna takes over Yuji, Kenjaku sits down with him to discuss a plan to take down Gojo Satoru. The new plan would be to use Calling Game to keep Gojo and the others occupied long enough for Sukuna to regain his former strength and enough power to kill Gojo. But how does Kenjaku even pull off a new Calling Game without Curse Spirit manipulation and idle transfiguration? In the original story, Kenjaku uses Curse Spirit manipulation to turn Mahito into a ball and gain a one-time use of idle transfiguration. He then uses that technique on Tengen's barrier to kickstart the Calling Game by remotely altering the souls of the people he had marked. But in this timeline, he forms a binding vow with Mahito, and Mahito would absolutely go along with it because no one would be more thrilled than Mahito by Kenjaku's vision of humanity's evolution, especially when that evolution revolves around optimizing cursed energy. Mahito then uses idle transfiguration himself to start the Calling Game. The players of the game and their numbers stay the same, but this time Gojo's also one of the players. Now we know from the original story that Kenjaku wants to use the Calling Game to generate dense, high-quality cursed energy to realize his ultimate goal of starting the merger after absorbing Tengen. But for that to happen, he first needs to take over Geto's body and gain Curse Spirit manipulation. And with Gojo still around, that's simply not happening. So Kenjaku's first real step toward his endgame is to have Sukuna kill Gojo so he won't get in his way of taking over Geto's body. So the Calling Game is now a race to get the remaining fingers and restore Sukuna to his former strength. And for that to happen, Megumi is needed. Now in the original story, Kenjaku wasn't present when Sukuna first took an interest in Megumi, but he knows the history. He knows that, in the past, a 10 Shadows user and a 6 Eyes plus Limitless user killed each other. He knows that the only thing shown to truly counter Gojo is the 10 Shadows. Yes, exactly. Gojo Satoru is the pinnacle. There's no known technique that can reliably defeat him, but history shows that 10 Shadows is the one exception. So Kenjaku uses Sumiki, whose body is taken over by Yorozu, to break Megami's spirit, and have Sukuna transfer over to Megami, and then have Sukuna tame Maharaga so he's finally ready to fight Gojo. Meanwhile, the Culling game is resolved by Yuta, who returns in time for the final battle, alongside Gojo himself and Maki. And yes, Maki still pulls in the Tachi on her clan, because while the Zenin clan wasn't acting as recklessly as it did after Gojo was sealed in the original story, Mai still sacrifices herself for Maki. That loss triggers the same crash out, and Maki proceeds to completely wipe out the Zenin clan. Chozo and Todo, on the other hand, are bloodlusted, because where is Yuji? And there's one major problem for Kenjaku's side. Sukuna is still only at 19 fingers, and only Gojo knows where the last one is. In the main story, they compensated by having Sukuna eat his own mummy, but that option doesn't exist here. Because while Kenjaku and Mahito were able to start the Culling game using idle transfiguration on Tengen's barrier, the barrier itself has not been broken yet, meaning Kenjaku hasn't been able to retrieve the mummy from Tengen. So wait, does that mean Gojo, who's actually stronger this time thanks to his memories, is going to fight a weaker version of Sukuna in the final battle? When everything's set in motion, Yuji's unconscious and in Kenjaku's possession, while Sukuna's using Megami as his vessel. Gojo thinks back to how things played out in his last life and answers, nah, I'd lose. But don't worry, he's only thinking about how it went the previous time. On the day of the fight, Gojo brings the final finger and casually throws it at Sukuna, like how Goku tossed the Senzu bean at Cell. This shocks the absolute living daylights out of everyone and even catches Sukuna off guard. Sukuna asks why, and Gojo simply says he wants to make things fair, because in his mind, simply having his memories is already too much of an advantage. But nah, Gojo isn't throwing the fight out of stupidity or pride. Another reason he throws the finger is because this is the perfect time to finally deal with the Sukuna problem for good. The fight begins, and at first it plays out much like the original, with Gojo casually toying around. But this Gojo can't be caught off guard. See, the reason he lost originally was because he never anticipated a dismantle that could bypass the world around him. But this Gojo already knows that's a thing. So when Maharaga adapts and Sukuna fires off a world-cutting slash, Gojo simply reads it with the 6 eyes and dodges it. And since Maharaga's already been one-shotted at this point, Sukuna now has 0 options left to defeat Gojo using the 10 shadows. That leaves Sukuna completely backed into a corner. With no other options left, he's forced to incarnate and reclaim his original Heian era body for round 2 against Gojo. So how does this actually go? Can a reborn Gojo beat Prime Sukuna? I'll leave that up to you guys. But keep one thing in mind, both of them have already fried their brains, so domain expansion's completely off the table. It'd be a very different fight compared to round 1. Here's how I see it playing out. Even if Gojo loses, Prime Sukuna would be left with less than 10 HP at best. Yuta and the others would then swoop in to finish him off and handle Kenjaku afterward. But if Gojo wins, he handles Kenjaku himself, reforms Jujutsu Society, and leads the next generation for decades. In fact, it goes even further than that. Even when the events of the Modulus sequel happen, Gojo would still be around and still be the strongest. Think about it. Kashimo was active as an old man, and Naobita was moving faster than sound in his 70s. And Gojo's built different from literally everyone. I can easily see him staying active past 100 years old, especially since his cursed energy efficiency and reverse curse technique would keep both his body and brain in perfect condition. That means he could personally deal with the alien conflict himself. And while everyone else they know eventually dies out, Gojo will have Yuji, and Yuji will have Gojo. Oh, and wait, Yuji would have Chozo too in this timeline because there's no reason for him to die in the final battle. I also don't see Todo going anywhere either. Pro's easily living to 100. But what do you think? Is this really how things would play out if Gojo was reborn with all his memories? And how do you think a fight between reborn Gojo and Prime Heian era Sukuna in his original body would actually end? And if you made it this far, click on this next video where I break down all 6 special grade sorcerers in Jujutsu Kaisen.